Okay, so you're thinking about reading Twilight, but you're just not sure if it's worth all the hype. Or the hate, for that matter. Should you dive in, or should you just run for the hills? Well, we're here to help you figure that out.
Yeah, Twilight is definitely one of those books that people seem to either really love or they just absolutely hate it. Very few people land in the middle.
Exactly. And to help us all figure this out, we've got a whole stack of Goodreads reviews, and we even have a professional critique. Just think of us as like your cheat sheet to Twilight. Without you actually having to read the whole thing, we're going to unpack the writing style, the content, and also whether it even holds a candle to some other vampire fiction out there that you might actually enjoy more.
So to be totally upfront, the verdict is it's a mixed bag. It's not exactly like a literary masterpiece or anything, but it very clearly scratched an itch for millions of readers.
So more like guilty pleasure territory then.
Yeah, precisely. And I think one of the keys here is really knowing who the target audience is. That's going to really help you decide if this book is for you. Think like escapist romance. Paranormal vibes.
Yeah.
If you're already like rolling your eyes at that, this might not be the book for you.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about the writing style. Some of these reviews did not hold back.
Yeah, Meyer's writing style is definitely a point of contention for a lot of people. A lot of readers call her out for being repetitive,
Yeah.
overly descriptive, and sometimes just like plain clunky.
And I gotta ask, is it as bad as some people say? Give us all the juicy detail.
Well, there's this one description of Edward's skin. She describes it as like thousands of tiny diamonds embedded in the surface. I mean, come on, sparkling vampires are one thing, but diamond skin.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty over the top, even for a vampire romance.
All right. And it's not even just the descriptions. The pacing can be really slow too, especially in like the first half of the book, where it's mostly just Bella and Edward kind of mooning over each other.
So if somebody's looking for like a lot of action
Mm.
and a fast-paced plot,
Mm.
they might want to steer clear then.
Definitely. The main appeal of this book is the romance. It's all about this like intense forbidden attraction between a human girl and a vampire.
Okay, so speaking of Bella, let's talk about our leading lady. The reviews were all over the place. Some people found her relatable. Some people found her irritating. There were even accusations of Mary Sue. What's your take on all that?
Bella Swan is definitely a character that you either love or you hate. Some readers really connect with her clumsiness and her self-deprecating humor. They kind of see her as this like ordinary girl who's been thrust into these extraordinary circumstances.
Okay, but I'm seeing here that a lot of other reviewers, they called her out for being weak and passive. Is that a fair criticism, do you think?
I mean, there's definitely a valid point there. Bella constantly puts Edward's needs before her own, to a point that some people see it as kind of unhealthy. One reviewer even pointed out this line where Bella thinks, "You are my life. You're the only thing that it would hurt me to lose." I mean, that's some pretty intense devotion, bordering on obsession, if you ask me.
That's a little much, even for a teenager in love.
Yeah.
So we've got a flawed heroine here. What about our brooding vampire hero, Edward? Is he all just dreamy smiles and smoldering glances?
Edward is, he's complicated. You know, he's a century-old vampire, but he's trapped in this teenage body, and he's struggling with his bloodlust while also, like, obsessing over Bella. There's this whole, like, internal conflict that he has going on that I think some readers find kind of interesting.
Okay, but let's be real. Some of his behavior is straight up creepy. Watching Bella sleep, isolating her from her friends. I mean, that's not romantic. That's getting into stalker territory.
You're not wrong. There are definitely some red flags there. He can be very possessive and controlling. He makes decisions for Bella a lot without her consent. You could even argue that all his protectiveness is really just a way to manipulate her and isolate her.
Okay, so we've got questionable writing, a slow plot, and some potentially problematic characters. But what about the vampires themselves? We're talking like classic Dracula vibes here?
Not even close. This is where Meyer really throws tradition out the window. These vampires sparkle in the sunlight, they have super strength and speed, but no real weaknesses. And instead of craving human blood, they choose to live on animal blood. You know, like vegetarian vampires.
Yeah, the sparkling thing was a big talking point in the reviews. Some people found it unique, and other people just found it ridiculous. I'm kind of with the ridiculous camp on that one. If I want to read about sparkly beings, I'd pick up a fairy tale, not a vampire novel.
It really just depends on what you're looking for in your vampire fiction. If you're a stickler for the traditional lore, Twilight might not be for you.
So for somebody who loves vampire stories, but they're a little hesitant about all the Twilight quirks, what other books would you recommend? Like, what's a good comparison point?
Oh, that's a great question. And it really highlights how Twilight is kind of in a category of its own. If you're looking for a vampire romance with a bit more bite, pun intended, Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles is a good place to start. Those vampires are definitely not sparkling vegetarians.
Okay, what about something a little more action-packed? I'm thinking like Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh.
But in book form,
For a fun urban fantasy vibe. With a healthy dose of humor, Jim Butcher's Dresden Files series is a solid choice. It's about this wizard detective who deals with all sorts of supernatural creatures. Vampires, werewolves, you name it.
all right, those sound like good alternatives. All right, so back to Twilight. We've talked about all the quirks and stuff, but what about the substance? Did any of the reviews offer any insights into why this book became such a cultural phenomenon? I mean, sparkling vampires aside, something clearly resonated with millions of readers.
It's a fascinating question, right? And the answer is, well, there's no single answer. Part of it might be the escapist fantasy it offers. Finding true love. Especially with someone dangerous and alluring. It's a classic trope for a reason.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate fairy tale,
Yeah.
but with fangs instead of glass slippers.
Exactly. But it also really tapped into a specific cultural moment. Young adult fiction was really taking off at the time, and Twilight really captured that yearning for stories that center on teenage emotions, like first love, identity, all that angst.
And let's not forget the power of the internet. The Twilight fandom exploded online. Fan fiction debates. Team Edward versus Team Jacob. It was a whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. The internet created this space for fans to connect and geek out over the books together. It really amplified the hype and turned Twilight into more than just a book. It was like a shared experience.
Okay, so it was kind of a combination of factors then. The escapist romance, the timing, and then the whole online fan frenzy. But let's get down to brass tacks here. If somebody's on the fence about reading Twilight, knowing what we know now, what's the final verdict?
Here's the thing. Twilight is not for everyone. If you're looking for complex characters, a nuanced plot, or sophisticated writing, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Okay, play.
If you enjoy simple escapist romances, especially ones with like a paranormal twist, and you're willing to overlook some of the book's flaws, Twilight might be a fun, quick read for you.
So it's kind of like junk food for the brain then. Not exactly nutritious, but satisfying in the moment.
Exactly. It's important to set the right expectations going in. This is not high literature. It's pure entertainment.
So know yourself as a reader and choose wisely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Ultimately, whether or not you decide to pick up Twilight is up to you. We've given you the information. Now it's time to make your own judgment call.
And hey, even if you don't end up reading it, there's no denying that Twilight definitely left its mark on pop culture. It sparked all kinds of conversations and debates, and even a whole new wave of paranormal romance novels.
Love it or hate it, Twilight got people talking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought. We've dissected Twilight. We've pointed out its flaws. We've even offered some alternatives. But despite everything, it was a cultural juggernaut. It sold millions of copies, inspired blockbuster movies, and sparked a fandom that's still going strong today. Why? Why did this story, with all its imperfections, resonate so deeply with so many readers?
It really is fascinating, isn't it? How one book can just spark such strong reactions from people.
Yeah, but hey, I guess that's the power of a good story, right? Even with all its flaws, Twilight got people engaged in talking.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that taste is subjective. What one person finds compelling, another person might find utterly ridiculous, and that's totally okay.
Totally. All right, so just to wrap things up here, if you're looking for a light escapist read with a lot of romance and some paranormal spice, and you're not too bothered by sparkly vampires or a somewhat simplistic writing style, then Twilight might be worth checking out.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if you prefer your vampires to be a bit more menacing, and your plots to be a bit more complex, and you want a more polished writing style, then you should probably steer clear of this one. There are tons of other amazing vampire books out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And hey, who knows? You might even find yourself pleasantly surprised by Twilight. Flaws and all.
That's true.
Reading is all about exploration and finding what you enjoy.
Well said.
Okay, so that's it for our deep dive into Twilight. We hope this has given you a good sense of what to expect and helped you decide if it's the right book for you.
And if you've already ventured into the world of Twilight, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you love about it? What drove you crazy? Share your opinions in the comments, or send us a message. We're always up for a good big chat, even if it involves sparkling vampire.
Happy reading, everyone.